Yeah, we are off. It is Wednesday, January 24th, 2024, and I am very, very happy to see you. I can't see you or hear you. I'm actually at my parents' house, my childhood bedroom, so I'm just talking into a microphone, thinking of you in your car or making your coffee or walking down a trail, wherever you are, whoever you are. I am so grateful that you press play on today's episode of Stand Up, and hopefully you've subscribed to the show for free, and maybe, if I'm lucky, if we're lucky, you signed up for a paid subscription. That means you have access to our amazing community of people, and we are all getting together in Las Vegas, March 22nd and 23rd. More about that later, but I hope that you are coming. I am very happy to report my guest today is the great Sam Youngman, who I grow to like more and more every time we talk. He is the co-author, co-creator of my favorite daily news email. It's called Today's Big Stuff. We had a smart and quippy, witty conversation, as I always do, with Sam, which begins at 22 minutes after the news. But before that, there is plenty of news to cover here on the news segment, which I do each and every day right here at the top of the program. The best daily news segment in all of daily podcast land. So let's do it. Starting with, of course, the big story, the top story yesterday, which was, according to my daughter, that Ken got a Oscar nomination and Barbie did not, thus playing out in real life the kind of plot of the movie. We can maybe talk about that at the Hangout or later. How big of a deal is that to you or your kids or people who are seeing the Oscar nominations as a real disrespect to women and the modern day feminist movement? Well, there is some truth to that. But no, the top story is that he is back. Donald Trump won New Hampshire last night, and that means he's pretty much going to be the nominee. I think we already knew that already, but the exit polls and the data and more coming out of New Hampshire are ringing alarm bells in MAGA Nation. Well, they should be. It's not great for Donald Trump, and that's great for America and democracy. And I'll talk about it a little bit more in the news, but that is the big headline last night in our stupid presidential nominating contest. It really is dumb. You have these two tiny, whitest states ever deciding who is going to be the nominee very early on in that dumb process, created by the parties themselves, should be fair to say. Donald Trump is coming out in first place again. I heard somebody say the other day that we have been dealing with this guy for 9 years, and it is really hard to believe that we're going to have to deal with him for at least another one, if not longer. And on that note, let's get to some other sad and depressing news, but that's what we do. It's the news segment. We're talking about the aberrations. We don't talk about the happy, loving things that happen all day, every day, because they are the norm. These are the aberrations. This is the news. These are the big stories that impact you, your life, your community, your country, and your planet. That's the editorial parameters for the stories that I mention, cover, and try to dig into with many of my expert guests. Certainly is the case today with Sam Youngman, but I'll come back to the New Hampshire primaries and what happened last night. But other headlines yesterday. This was a pretty big story yesterday. The country of Turkey, their parliament, voted to allow the country of Sweden to join NATO, which puts Sweden one step closer to entering the alliance. New York Times says the move also eased a diplomatic stalemate that has clouded Turkey's relations with the U.S. and hampered Western efforts to isolate Russia. They say the vote means that Hungary is now the only NATO member that has not approved Sweden's accession, which requires unanimity. Prime Minister Viktor Orban of Hungary said today that he had invited Sweden's prime minister to negotiate Sweden's accession, suggesting that Hungary may seek concessions in exchange for its support. So that's pretty big news, a big development, and Sweden's effort to make NATO that much stronger, thus protecting itself from a Russian invasion. Israel said that 24 of its soldiers were killed in Gaza yesterday, about 20 of them in an explosion near the Israeli border. I mentioned this yesterday. I wondered how that could have possibly happened, but the explosion occurred after Gazan militants fired toward a tank guarding an Israeli engineering unit, which had been setting explosive inside Palestinian buildings to demolish them as part of a plan to, quote, a security zone along the length of the border. Apparently, the purpose of the security zone is to make it harder for militants to repeat an attack like that of October 7th. But when the concept gains momentum in December, the U.S. State Department spoke out against it because it would effectively reduce the size of Gaza. And now those soldiers have been killed while trying to create that zone. And the whole thing is terrible. Just terrific. And speaking of horror and war, let's go to Ukraine, where Russian missiles killed at least 5 people and wounded scores in Kyiv and Kharkiv, adding to concerns about the state of Ukraine's defenses, which reminds me of a tweet from our friend David Rothkopf yesterday that said, let's not be indirect. Brave Ukrainian soldiers are going to die because of the Republican Party. Ukrainian families and cities will be destroyed because of the GOP. If the GOP continues to block aid, Ukraine will lose ground to Russia because of it. The GOP is leading the fight for Vladimir Putin because they have not approved the support and aid for the Ukrainian military and government that they need to fight Putin, is what Rothkopf is saying, and I fully agree and reshared it. The Republican Party hates the freedom that the Ukrainians want and supports the authoritarianism of Putin and his support for the Republican Party and their nominee, Donald Trump. I just can't sadly see it any other way. That's the world that we are in today. The Republican Party is pro-Russian. How about that? Tell that to your dad's Republican Party. You know what they'd say? They'd say, well, that just can't be. That cannot be. That is a ridiculous notion to even suggest. Oh, wait a second. By golly, I think the boy's right. And now let's go to China, where we talked about with Dexter Roberts on this program the other day. China has now apparently sent a growing number of high-altitude balloons near Taiwan in recent days as it steps up pressure on the self-governing island after it held elections this month in defiance of China's claims of sovereignty. I think that's crazy. Dexter said we haven't seen any more of those Chinese balloons, and now there they are over Taiwan. It's part of a larger intimidation effort, according to Axios, that Taiwan's defense ministry has called cognitive warfare, an attempt to weaken the resolve of Taiwan's residents and leaders and bring their behavior more in line with Beijing's will. A lot more things happening around the world and some great international reporters and reporting that we should all support. But let's come back home to America, where there are headlines about the share of American workers who are members of a union has hit a new low in 2023. It's now 1 in 10, though the number of unionized employees rose slightly. Unions, of course, are needed, and I am a very, very big proponent of worker rights and compensation. And the news is that 10% of the workforce was part of a union in 2023, down from 10.1% in 2022, a high of 20.1% in 1983. 14.4 million workers were union members in 2023, up from 2022, but the percentage fell because the workforce grew at a faster rate than union membership. And this is just a slight drop in union membership, came during a significant year for big labor, including the UAW scoring huge contracts, Teamsters winning concessions from UPS without a strike, actors and writers unions getting new deals from Hollywood after a really bruising work stoppage, which I certainly lost on. But in the public sector, 32.5% of workers were members of unions in 2023. Again, that was just in the private sector, where it's just 6% of private workers. And lastly, the approval of unions in 2022 reaching the highest point since 1965, and news and information according to Gallup on that one. But a big story that I wanted to mention, especially since California State University and the union representing their faculty, CSU faculty, announced yesterday they had reached a tentative agreement ending the system-wide strike at 23 campuses. Let's go down to Washington, D.C., the Supreme Court news. Let's see. The Biden administration told the court yesterday that a lower court, the Fifth Circuit's decision to curtail the widely used abortion pill called mifepristone would have, quote, disruptive consequences for women if the FDA, if it's allowed to stand. The Supreme Court has agreed to review the New Orleans-based federal appeals court's ruling, setting the stage for another significant abortion case following its June 2022 decision to end federal abortion protections and overturn Roe v. Wade. This case also presents a direct challenge to the FDA's power to regulate drugs. Biden administration said that the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruling threatens profound harms to the government, the healthcare system, patients, and the public. The loss of access to the pill would be damaging for women and healthcare providers around the nation, they said. For many patients, the pill is the best method to lawfully terminate their early pregnancies. They may choose mifepristone over surgical abortion because of medical necessity, desire for privacy, or past trauma. A huge percentage of women, by the way, terminate their pregnancies using this pill or a similar one, but it remains under an order the Supreme Court issued in April maintaining the status quo that you could still have access to it. The Supreme Court yet to announce a date for oral arguments in this case, but it's a huge one, and that's why I mention it, because it is terrible for Republicans, this issue, especially in swing states, and a really, really big story, and would impact so many women and families, which is why I follow that one pretty closely. How about this horrific only in America in terms of civilized countries headline? After a botched execution, Alabama is trying an untested method. The state plans to carry out the first U.S. execution via nitrogen hypoxia with Kenneth Smith, who survived an earlier attempt to execute him by lethal injection. That boggles the mind, that headline. They already tried to execute Kenneth Smith back in November of 2022. He'd been on death row for more than a quarter of a century after being convicted of murdering a woman. At the time, Alabama was using the same method of execution that had been used in a vast majority of modern U.S. executions, lethal injection. But like a lot of other places and states, Alabama had problems. The team of people trying to kill him repeatedly failed to insert the intravenous line correctly, and they ran out of time to carry out the execution before the death warrant expired at midnight. I just can't believe this story. But now more than a year later, Alabama again preparing to execute this guy. But this time they're employing a method that has never been used in U.S. execution, nitrogen hypoxia. This method you can use in assisted suicides in Europe. He's going to be now wearing a mask and administered a flow of nitrogen gas, effectively depriving him of oxygen until he dies, which is an absolutely horrific story. And for so many reasons, the fact that we have capital punishment and a death penalty in America is so terrible and reprehensible. And another reason, another fair criticism as to why we aren't the greatest country in the world, and brings me shame to be American on that. I have no problem saying that. It's shameful. Strong opinions on that, by the way, in case you couldn't tell. So that's such a horrific story. I've got to share something good. How about this? An 11-year-old boy who was born deaf gained the ability to hear again after receiving genetic treatment targeted for a particular kind of congenital deafness. And that is a wonderful story. A boy was born deaf in a poor community in the country of Morocco. And last year, after moving to Spain, his family took him to a hearing specialist. He was eligible for this clinical trial using gene therapy. And the treatment was a success, introducing a child who had known nothing of sound to a new world. Just an amazing story. And I wanted to share that one with you. Good news. Oh, and one more good news story. How about that? At least this is my opinion, that the state of Vermont, which I love for a lot of reasons, has become the latest state to propose a wealth tax. 7 states tried but failed in 2023 to add new taxes on assets and income. Attempts are underway in at least 10 states this year, and proponents are optimistic about their chances. We'll have to talk to our friend Mara Quint about that real soon. And a third good news story. I like this one. Saw this at the New York Times. To slash carbon emissions, colleges are using deep underground pipes to heat and cool their buildings without burning fossil fuels. It's called geo-exchange. It's not new, but it's increasingly a choice made by colleges and universities, particularly in the northern United States, that are seeking to decarbonize. Geo-exchange, one type of geothermal system. Other types extract heat from the deep and earth, but don't return it. It's a whole thing. It's really fascinating and really very important, and I wanted to mention that story here at the end of headlines. Now let's get to your sound for today. Let's go to New Hampshire, where there's a lot of attention on the disgraced former president who won New Hampshire last night, and he gave a really vicious speech last night, not only about his only opponent left, Nikki Haley, but literally about the people kind of in front of him or running with him. He was standing there in the frame, you can see Vivek, you could see Senator Tim Scott, and you could see dumb Eric Trump. But this was probably the 20 seconds or so that got the most attention. Maybe I missed something else, but listen to this one. Again, he's standing in front of Tim Scott when he does this.
Did you ever think that she actually appointed you, Tim? And think of it, appointed, and you're the senator of his state, and she endorsed me. You must really hate her. No, it's a shame. It's a shame. Uh-oh.
I just love you.
No, that's why he's a great politician.
Oh, man. So real weird. He said, you must really hate her. And then Tim Scott walks up to the microphone. Uh-oh. mad? No, he's just got to. It's just horrible right there. And here's Kayleigh McEnany last night on Fox News. This got a lot of attention because she said this.
Here's why I say this. This was actually a fairly good night for Joe Biden. When you look at our voter analysis, only 10% said, I would not vote for Joe Biden if he's the nominee. He won a plurality of voters who said he was too old. He won a majority of voters who are upset about the Gaza war. So the divides in the Democrat Party, and this is a small sample size, but perhaps aren't as stark as one would think. But when you look at the Republican Party, 7 in 10 Nikki Haley voters said, I would not vote for Trump. There was a Des Moines Register poll, 43% said, no, I wouldn't vote for Trump. If I'm Trump, I sit back and I exclusively focus on the general election. I take the posture of a presumptive nominee. I focus on, number one, uniting the party, and number two, winning the independents, which Nikki Haley won 55 to 39%. That's what I would do. Nikki Haley, the closest margin is 30% in the states ahead. For all intents and purposes, he's the presumptive nominee.
And then here's Kellyanne Conway, also on Fox News.
This is for him to sweep those first 3 states. It's pretty decisive. Last point. This is a democracy, a constitutional republic. We must respect the will of the people. And Nikki Haley can't become an election denier. She's been rejected. She can say tonight she came in second, or you can say she came in last.
Okay, good shit. Good stuff. Watching them fight is wonderful and horrible at the same time. Let me just quickly go back to Trump's New Hampshire speech, because I do have to play at least one more clip for you. This is just 25 seconds of the disgraced former president attacking Nikki Haley and the dress she was wearing.
I felt I should do this because I find in life you can't let people get away with bullshit, okay? You can't. You just can't do that. And when I watched her in the fancy dress that probably wasn't so fancy come up, I said, what's she doing? We won. And she did the same thing last week, but he was much more angry about it than I was. I said, get up there and you let him know. I felt He
was pointing to Vivek when he said he, or was it Tim Scott? I don't know. They're both standing behind him like dolts, like Samuel Jackson's character in Django Unchained. Ron Filipkowski tweeted about that clip you just heard. He said, there's never been a more divisive person in the history of American politics. He tore apart this country. His own political party, even families don't speak to each other. We're either going to go down a very dark road with this lunatic or be done with him after this year. I hope to be done with him now. I want to be done with him now. I feel bad for even playing 2 clips of him today. Trump went on to say that Nikki Haley will be under investigation by the Biden administration if she became the nominee. And then he said he could tell you a whole bunch of reasons why. Because Donald Trump is an unhinged, dangerous man who will say anything about anyone to destroy them. And he has destroyed hundreds, if not thousands, of people's lives directly with the things that he's said or insinuated that they've committed crimes, etc. The question is, can Donald Trump rebuild his 2016 coalition? And I say if we do the work and beat his ass is impossible. Is not exactly Mr. Unity, if you will. All right. Well, let me go to one more news clip and we'll do some comedy and get to my interview with Sam Youngman, which is also fun and funny. But let's head over to CNN, where Jake Tapper, Aaron Burnett, and Abby Phillips, they analyzed the Trump speech and the New Hampshire primary results. I'll give you 2 minutes of that, which I think is decent.
And Aaron, I think, one of the things that's interesting about Donald Trump's performance this evening is he's mad. He's angry. That was not a celebratory Trump. He's angry that Nikki Haley is still in the race. Right. He was insulting her. He was insulting voters of New Hampshire. He was insulting the process of the primary system there, which has been going on for, it was going the same way back when Donald Trump was a Democrat. He went after the governor. This is not gracious, Donald Trump. I'm going to be the nominee. Come, let us all come together and heal. This is, I am furious. Where's my hype man to do even more attacks against?
The people arrayed behind him and the whole, even as what's interesting is he did better than his own campaign had set the expectations.
Oh, he did great. He should be in a good mood.
Right. Kristen Holmes was saying they expected it to be, 7 points, which was a spin to say that, oh, wow, if it's close, 7 points is a win.
Yeah.
Right now, as everything's still being finalized, you're looking at something certainly in the double digits, Abby. So he should be feeling good. But as Jake said, that's not the tone.
Add Nikki Haley to the roster of people standing behind him who he defeated. Yeah. There's a reason that they're all there. The Vivek Ramaswamys and the Tim Scotts and whoever else. Trump wants to show his dominance, to prove it to voters, and to have people come and kiss the ring. And the fact that Nikki Haley has not done that yet is a problem for him. But I will say, Nikki Haley and her campaign, they're going to be huddling probably every day until that decision is made. And in the meantime, all of the people around her know Trump's mood tonight, and they see his anger, and they do not want to be on the other side of Donald Trump if he is inevitably, as he looks like he might be, the nominee to the Republican Party. That is going to be a huge pressure point for Nikki Haley as people try to not be the last person to cross the line over to the Trump column.
All right, well, there you go. CNN analysis of the outcomes last night. And now let's have some laughs thanks to Jimmy Kimmel and his writers over at ABC's Jimmy Kimmel Live. He was talking, well, the part I picked was the bits about the Academy Award nominations and Barbie. And unsurprisingly, Jimmy Kimmel had the same reaction that I and many others did.
And Barbie was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, which who would have imagined? I mean, when you heard they were making a movie about Barbie, they would get nominated for 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. It's a movie, I mean, maybe a 5-year-old girl? Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig were not nominated for acting or directing, whereas Ryan Gosling was. He got a nomination for playing Ken, which ironically was kind of the plot of the Barbie movie. It's pretty crazy. Ryan Gosling plays a guy with no testicles and gets an Oscar nomination. Ron DeSantis does it. He has to drop out of the primary. It's not fair.
All right, there you go. Jimmy Kimmel Live. And now, folks, it's time to get to my guest on today's program, Sam Youngman, who is brilliant and hilarious. He's a veteran campaign reporter and the co-writer, co-creator of my favorite daily newsletter, Today's Big Stuff. And that is coming up. But first, a word from our good friend Pete Coe about our big gathering in March.
Hey there, stand-up listeners. If you're a regular or even just a casual listener to this podcast, you'll want to check out our live event happening this spring. The Stand-Up Pod Jam, Saturday, March 23rd in Las Vegas. General admission tickets start at just $25. Beginning at 10 a.m., you could be part of the live podcast audience. Then round off the day with some comedy and music, featuring frequent guests and funny humans, J.L. Covan, Ophira Eisenberg, Christian Finnegan, and even Pete himself, as well as musical guests Gareth Sever of comedy percussion group Buckets and Boards, and Grammy Award-winning songwriter John Carroll. It's Stand Up with Pete Dominic Live, the Stand Up Pod Jam. Follow the link in the show notes for more info and to purchase your tickets now.
Yes, thank you very much, Pete Coe, and thank all of you for joining me today's show. And that is the news, that is the promo. It is ad-free. Can't do it without your subscription. So go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic right now. Speaking of right now, let's get to my interview with today's amazing guest. Well, I could think of nobody better to talk to than my friend Sam Youngman, and luckily he was able to fit me in his very busy schedule. Thank you very much for joining me. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, Pete. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me, man.
Always talking about and reading your daily newsletter, which I laugh my ass off at every day. Can't wait till it comes in. And I guess just to promote it as I always want to do, because you guys are so great, what time do you have a deadline? I don't actually know what time it usually comes in. Does it come in at different times? Because I just look at it as soon as it gets there.
We shoot for late morning Eastern time. I'm in LA, and so I give myself a hard deadline of 8 a.m., but I aim to get it done long before then. It's just, sometimes I hit the snooze button and it comes in a little later.
Before we get to the hard stuff, which of you or your partner Adam is more outraged or really thinking about the Academy Awards? Because I didn't know anything about the Academy Award, nominations until I read your newsletter. I didn't even know they were out, but someone seemed very pissed at today's big stuff.
It was me. I won't hide it. I was furious. I don't know. I mean, did you see Barbie? It was fantastic.
I did.
And I don't understand how you nominate Ken but not Barbie. It seems like it's almost a sequel to the movie. And Greta Gerwig's a damn genius. She made the movie of the year, arguably, and for her not to be nominated for Best Director, it's insane.
She was not nominated. Excuse me. Those are the two big controversies, that Margot Robbie was not nominated, and she plays Barbie, the lead actress, I guess, and then Greta Gerwig is a writer and director of the film. Is that right? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's right. And yeah, both shut out. And now Ryan Gosling gets nominated for playing Ken, which, I support that. I thought he was great. But to, deny those two women is just shocking. It's but also it's nice to be outraged about something other than, somebody coming for your rights or destroying your democracy. It's
yeah, that's what you said.
I feel back, I feel good being back in the place where I'm outraged about Academy Award snubs, even really obviously sexist ones.
Yeah, that's really a very good point to create a certain amount of perspective there. But it is a still big deal. I mean, these award shows are a reflection of something, but maybe they're a reflection of the people who are voting in them. Increasingly, they become wokeified, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they took a year off from being woke this year. I don't know. But I'm also still trying to figure out what the hell woke means. I know that they say Florida's where woke goes to die. I guess that's also where winning presidential campaigns go to die.
Yeah, so let's get into it. You have a real chip on your shoulder for Ron DeSantis, and I think apparently his wife. Why do you not like this Ron DeSantis, and why are you piling on with everybody else and not just letting the man have some grace and find some peace during this time?
I'll give him the same amount of grace that he's given to, black voters in Florida, that he's given to young kids in Florida. Yeah, exactly. Zero. Look, the truth of the matter is Ron DeSantis is a weird freak show of a man who carries around a poop map in his pocket. And, we watched him for 2 years.
Unpack that poop map story real quick, because I don't.
Well, do you remember the debate he was having? I believe it was against Gavin Newsom, where he produces a map of poop from his travels in California, and his point. I guess he was trying to vilify the unhoused because they've got it so good, but he's the kind of man who's got the nickname Pudding Fingers, but doesn't think twice about carrying a map of poop in his pocket. And you really got to be more self-aware than that. But no, look, he turned Florida into a laboratory of cruelty, standing on the shoulders of the marginalized to try and launch his campaign. And my thing is, yeah, Ron DeSantis is a freak, no question about it. But tell me about the media. Tell me about the donors who saw this lunatic, who saw this weird dude who doesn't even know how to stand right, and thought, you know what, that guy's got presidential material written all over him.
It feels like people that had been following Ron DeSantis, like Florida reporters and others who had been following him, whether he was in Congress, knew that he was off. There's something wrong with him, personality-wise, and they were better equipped to predict that he wasn't going to go that far once. I feel like I heard that. It was this guy, Ron Filipkowski, who's a big Florida Republican guy, former. And he's like, anybody that knew him at all knew that once everybody got to see him, they would realize he's a weirdo, and without judgment, you can't win a Republican primary, much less a Democratic primary, by being that weird. Ask Howard Dean. He made one loud noise, and we vanquished him. And this guy he doesn't know how to smile. He doesn't know how to stand. And the comedians have a field day. We have a field day with this guy.
Yeah. I mean, he's a complete freak. And I think the thing that really gets me is for 2 years in the run up to his campaign, we just saw him go out of his way to fuck with everybody he could, erase black history from textbooks, lead the charge on book banning, and then turn around and deny that he was doing it. And again, it just seemed like the more cruel he was, the more people saw him as a potential Republican frontrunner. And it just, goddamn, he's just a walking commentary about how fucked up that party is right now.
It's a really good point. It's a really good point that cruelty is the point, and cruelty wins Republican hearts and minds. And the people who identified as Republicans that see that no longer want to be seen as Republicans because they're not that big of assholes.
Yeah.
And it is really the brand, and Ron DeSantis copied Donald Trump, and he did such a shitty, terrible job at it that no one was convinced, apparently. Is that right?
I think that is right. It was Trumpism without Trump. I guess the thing that just boggles my mind is, they need it packaged with a better personality or a better looking guy, and they think that Trump is that answer. I don't know. I guess maybe all the years on The Apprentice helped him become that person, but I don't know. To me, the fear early on was that DeSantis would be a smarter, more competent version of Trump, which I think those fears have been allayed for good. But, it's been this question all along, right? Can Trumpism exist without Trump? I'm still worried about Trumpism existing with Trump, but it does sort of point to the idea that maybe when Trump is no longer a factor, hopefully rotting in a prison cell somewhere, then maybe this, fever will break a little bit. I don't know the answer to that, but I am glad the answer isn't Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, well, where's Ron DeSantis going? Right back to Florida. And I was obviously, if people didn't know, joking about giving him any grace. He deserves none. He is an absolute terrible person. When it comes to policy, when it comes to the things that he has actually put into action policy, minimalizing, marginalizing LGBT folks and everything you said about Black history, and that asshole Christopher Rufo is his right-hand man down there. He appointed a Surgeon General who doesn't believe in vaccines and is a COVID conspiracy theorist. We could go on. Disenfranchised felons who, on a referendum, they got the right to vote, demonized Anthony Fauci. And he goes back to Trump and he kisses the ring. And Tim Scott has kissed the ring. And Nikki Haley will kiss the ring maybe tomorrow, maybe in a few weeks, but she probably will. And that'll be shocking if she does, but I guess she probably will. You have plenty to say about her. But what is it? How do you diagnose these people who he savages, Donald Trump savages over and over, who they say you should never trust him? They return his fire, and then they come and kiss the ring. What is that? How do you define it?
Well, I would say it's a combination of craven opportunism and a complete lack of self-respect. I mean, look at what the hell he did to Tim Scott on the eve of the New Hampshire primary, making jokes about the guy getting engaged and saying they never thought that would happen. And you make a good point. Of course, Nikki will kiss the ring. I guess that's my big question going into this election. We're seeing a lot of people in places like New Hampshire, Nikki Haley supporters, who are saying, look, I'm anybody but Trump. And my question is, do they stay that way? Or by October, have they changed their tune? And have they done exactly what Nikki will do? Have they done exactly what Ron did, what Tim Scott did, which is basically just find this, convince yourself that your survival depends on kissing the ass of somebody who has zero regard for you.
Yeah, well, it's just a bizarre thing. I mean, I understand wanting to stay in power if you're Ted Cruz or Lindsey Graham, wanting to stay a senator, but you like to think that these are men with egos who care about their legacy or care about history, and they don't seem to care about how history will see them or how anybody sees them now, as long as I guess they're in power, they're in office. It's the only way I can really understand that kind of. I mean, if you go after my wife. Talking about this with my dad yesterday. I was like, if you go after someone that I love, my kid, my father, he said that Ted Cruz's dad killed Kennedy.
Yeah, I mean, told the whole world how ugly Ted Cruz's wife is. I mean, my God.
Yeah. Ben Shapiro has returned to Donald Trump yesterday. He was busy in Auschwitz with Elon Musk, whitewashing his anti-Semitism. Any reaction to that?
I think it's appalling. Few people have done more to lift up neo-Nazi voices in the last couple of years than Elon Musk. And the idea that he could just go to Auschwitz, the scene of one of humanity's greatest crimes, and use it to sort of rehab this image. And it just, honestly.
Shouldn't the curator of Auschwitz been at the gate like, nope, I'm sorry. No,
I've
no
thought
Nazis.
about that, but at the same time, the reason Auschwitz is open to tourists is to educate them so that we don't forget. And, you like to hope that maybe Elon had this moment of self-awareness where he realized what he was doing, but I doubt that's the case because I just don't think he's capable of it.
Remember, it's like when Marjorie Taylor Greene went to the Holocaust Museum and she walked out, she's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea. No one told me.
I know.
And then, of course, return to being an anti-Semite and supporting anti-Semites. But yeah, it's you're right about that. Educated. The only way you can educate ignorant people like that is to show them the truth of what happened in that case. Let's go back quickly to the presidential campaign. Yeah. And I mean, this is going to post. I guess we're going to know. It looks like Nikki Haley is going to lose and Donald Trump is going to win big in New Hampshire. Any? Can you see it any other way? And this will be moot, I guess.
I really don't. I mean, it's funny. We're watching the horse race journalist right now try to decide what counts as a win for Trump or what counts as a win for Biden. To me, a win is a win. You know, if Trump can be on, in court one day with a woman who, a jury found he's sexually abused and then win the New Hampshire primary the next day, what else do you need to know? I mean, really, what else do you need to know? And for me, the flip side on Democratic tickets, the same thing. If Joe Biden's winning, then Joe Biden's winning. I don't need to know anything more.
Well,
he's not on the ballot.
The only thing I need to know is who appointed that judge, Democrat or Republican. Then I'll decide how I feel about the justice.
Right. Yeah. No, the judicial system depends on, who Trump says is a good guy or not.
Yeah, not that it matters, but Bill Clinton appointed that judge. It's like 30 years ago.
Right. Yeah. It's one of those things where the longer this goes on, you wonder just what color the sky is in these people's world. Are they able to just tune it out completely? I look at somebody like Nancy Mace, who endorsed Trump this week and has come out, as a rape survivor. And my first question is, why doesn't the Associated Press in this interview bring that up at all? Like, is that just, I covered 3 presidential races. I never covered a single one where a candidate being found liable for rape would have been treated like this small of a deal, or where this unemployment rate would have been treated like this small of a deal. But my second question is an extra 10 minutes on the political stage worth it for Nancy Mace to just say or do whatever? And, you've seen it. Like, you remember George Allen, the senator from Virginia? He watched, 1 minute we're in Iowa talking about him running for president. The next minute he has this racist thing where he calls his Democratic tracker, quote, macaca, and it just destroys his campaign. He's finished. And I remember, trying to get a hold of him when he was in the Senate was never an easy deal, right? There's layers and layers of staffers. Yeah. I remember calling him after he was done. And he was the easiest guy in the world to get a hold of. And he was so happy that I called. And it's just, these guys are addicted to this lifestyle. They're addicted to just the smallest amount of power. And, for them, giving that up or losing that is a fate worse than having your wife called ugly in front of the whole world. Yeah. No, it's all really good points. It's going to come down to, if it comes down to Trump and Biden, there's going to be so much coverage and legitimate about both of these men's cognitive abilities. Are they too old to be president? And both of them are going to continue to say the wrong thing or the wrong name or stutter or stammer. And it does seem, I'm trying to be objective, I pay close attention, that lately Trump has had some really big misses that if Joe Biden said them, they would be much, much bigger deal. And I'm sure there's all kinds of different reasons for that. But what do you make of Trump's latest kind of gas and incoherence when he called Nancy Pelosi? He meant to say Nancy Pelosi about January 6th during that lie that he's been telling over and over that she had power instead of him. And he said Nikki Haley 3 times. And there's so many other examples. But what do you – it seems like I heard even his Truth Social people were making fun of him for that one. Yeah, I tell you, that son of a bitch has always seemed crazy to me. So for me, it's sort of a sliding bar. Like, when he was making fun of disabled reporters in 2016, that seemed pretty fucking crazy to me. But I think you'd be hard-pressed not to say that there's been a big change. I mean, there was one moment Monday night, the eve of the New Hampshire primary, where it's just straight gibberish, just, disconnected words coming out of his mouth that you can't put together in any kind of order that would make sense. And you could say, okay, maybe just the pressure's getting to him. You got 91 felony counts hanging over you. You're in 8 different courtrooms every day of the week, and you're running for president. Yeah, that would take its toll on anybody. But I think the reality is he's gone mad, and he probably always was.
Yeah, no doubt about it. He's definitely gone mad, and you just keep hearing people say he's losing it, but he's been losing it for a very long time, and then some days are a lot worse than others, but it's just going to be fascinating if it comes down to these two. The competition for the analysis of their cognitive abilities is going to be like a daily thing. That's why neither one of them.
I guess I'm just grateful that we're finally talking about this with regard to Trump, because I feel like for the last 2 years, it was a one-sided conversation with the White House press and the Capitol Hill press asking these questions about Joe Biden, while all the while ignoring the guy who, looked up at an eclipse or would tell us all about invisible airplanes. And, to me, Trump, his great trick is getting the press to make him seem more normal than he is. And so if, they're finally starting to pay attention to, if this shit has gotten so crazy that even they can't ignore it, then maybe we're breaking through and we're getting a place where we can have a real conversation about just how there this guy is.
Yeah, no, that well said. Sam, do you think, I've said a few times lately, I think that we cover this stuff every day. We talk about it all the time. It's really important to pay attention to what's happening in politics in the presidential campaign. But don't you think it's still, we see the improving economy, stock market records. You mentioned that in today's big stuff today. But you also mentioned the issue of abortion and how much attention, with the anniversary of the overturning of Roe v. Wade, how much attention the Biden campaign, much less administration, is giving this issue. My point is, we see this coverage every day, but isn't it really just going to come down to maybe just that issue for a lot of voters?
I mean, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, just look at the way abortion rights has performed every place it's been on the ballot since Roe was overturned. I mean, there have been shocking results from Kansas to Ohio to Kentucky, places that we just wouldn't expect to see the kind of numbers that we've seen. I think it was like 62% in Kentucky. That's, it's shocking. And I think when you take an issue like so many of the issues we talk about can be seen as abstract, like an existential question about democracy, stuff like that. But when you're talking about taking away basic human rights from people, that's personal in a way that most political debates are not. And people don't forget about that shit. The pundits might forget about it. They might want to move on to whatever the story du jour is. But if to a person who's just had their rights taken away from the government, they're not going to forget about that shit.
I also think that voting rights being taken away, and what we don't talk about enough, and probably the campaign should focus more on, I know what would animate me, it certainly directly affects me, is healthcare. What if our healthcare rights are taken away? What if those of us that are getting our insurance through the Obamacare created exchanges lose that because Trump is able to repeal? I mean, that was something that would motivate people. What about Social Security and Medicare? Forget about, that. He has talked about, and Republicans have talked about, abolishing all of those programs. I wonder if those policies or programs will motivate people who otherwise, aren't motivated to vote for Joe Biden.
I would hope so, but I think we make a mistake when we think that people always vote in their own interest. We know that they don't. I mean, I'll tell you just a quick story. In 2015, I covered the Kentucky governor's race. Republican Matt Bevin, who was sort of Trump before Trump was on the stage, he ran the whole time on getting rid of Kentucky was one of the first red states to expand Medicaid, to embrace Obamacare. And Bevin ran the whole time on getting rid of that. And so he wins by 9 points. And I spiraled. Everything I thought I knew about Kentucky, about politics, about people, I was questioning everything. And then one day I was reading a Washington Post story. They had sent somebody down to Eastern Kentucky to find out why these folks had voted the way they had. And they talked to this guy who was at the Obamacare sign-up place, this guy who's staying alive because of the Medicaid expansion. And he voted for Matt Bevin. And they said, why did you vote for him? He said, well, he's going to shake things up. And I snapped out of it like that. I thought, if that son of a bitch doesn't care, then I don't either. But, I mean, that's the thing. Like I said, some of these ideals, some of these debates become abstract to people. They see a larger issue. He's fighting for me, or he's standing up for me, and I can, deal with the details later. Abortion is not like that. Abortion is a very concrete, personal health issue that is not, it's not something that's easily, turned into a gray area. It's not something that, both sides can muddy the waters. People know exactly where everybody stands on this, and they know exactly what it means. And we're finding out every day just how horrible it is, in post-Roe world. In a post-Roe world.
Yeah. No, really, really well said. Before I let you go, Sam, you do such a great job on today's big stuff every day. I learn stuff because there are things in there that even someone like me that scans the news for my own news segment every night and day missed. Do you think there's any undercovered stories? I'm putting you on the spot. Maybe there's nothing that you have at the tip of your mind that hasn't been covered enough, that people don't know enough about, or trends or issues at all, besides the snubbing of Barbie, actress and director?
That's my big passionate thing today. I'm not going to be over that for a while. But no, look, I'm glad that we are talking more about Trump's mental state. I think that is absolutely a relevant issue. I'm glad we're talking more about E. Jean Carroll. It was amazing to me for months the press seemed to just, whistle, put their hands in their pockets and look the other way. That's got to be an issue that we're talking about. That's a very real thing. I'd like to see more real coverage of Donald Trump and more, and fewer, let's go to the diner to find out why people support him. I know why people support him. Right. We all do. At this point, it shouldn't be a mystery.
So well said. As always, love it, love it, love it. Today's big stuff, everybody. Sam Youngman, thank you for taking some time out of your day and joining me. You're just the guy I want to talk to today to cover all this.
Thanks, Pete. I really appreciate you, man.
Yeah, there he goes. I really appreciate him. Go subscribe to Today's Big Stuff right now and subscribe to this podcast, patreon.com/PeteTomic, to support me. And that's it. That's all. That's what I've got for you on today's show. I hope you appreciate it, learn from it, as I did in prepping it and doing it. And I can't do it without your support. Yesterday at this time, I thanked all you bumblebees, and so many of you actually got back to me. Troy and Doug, Paul and Mindy, Justin and Kim and Brent Brent, and many more. Those are just a few of you that I think emailed me. Who did I miss? Joe Leota, I believe. You guys are the greatest, and I'm sure there are so many more of you bumblebees who listen all the way to the very, very end of today's show. I like to give you shout-outs and special hugs and extra love because you give it to me each and every day. That's all I've got for you today. I look forward to talking to you tomorrow. I should have the president of the Florida Education Association, Andrew Spar, who's always an amazing guest on the show. But feel free, you bumblebees especially, tell me who you want to hear, and I'll give it special attention.
Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense and you stand up. Stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand